I wanted, this is actually a picture right before of the flight that I was on. And I don't know if any of you guys, hopefully we've got some folks down from Southern California on the call, but and if you've been to the beach, you've seen the giant container ships that are, out there in the ocean. These aren't little islands or some stupid rich dude's yacht. They're container ships, right? And you can see them from the coast, and you can read about them on the news. And you might say, well, that's a crappy picture that you have on your terrible old iPhone, but what does that have to do with this conversation? And I think it has a lot to do with this conversation. Those container ships, right? They represent a lot of carbon. They also represent a lot of air quality issues. And Los Angeles is not a stranger to those air quality issues, but I think our industry, and I like to say that the slides I'm going to go definitely, it's amazing to hear the folks at Sellon and Turner talking about this, and every single contractor who pushes their job sites forward on this, every architect that's asking for it, every client that cares about this. Because, I think a lot of the points were made that we really need to get together and make a difference, because we have so much impact. We can really, move the dial when it comes to things like reducing asthma, reducing cancer rates in communities. And we can do that by getting smart around how we're, attacking our supply chains, how we're moving towards more local, low carbon materials. Because, right now, all of those ships backed up, not all that is construction, maybe it's coffee mugs or holiday presents, but right now it's the equivalent to adding almost 6 million passenger cars to the region. And that's a lot for Los Angeles. And it's, people by the port, they're really getting impacted as well. It's not just a coastline, people like me living in Santa Monica. So we really need to think about the human impact too. And I think that's a really strong way of telling this story for people who maybe aren't moved by the carbon impact yet, people who don't care about climate change. I know that there's those folks out there, but the health impact is something I want to talk to you about today. And, I think what we need to start figuring out as an industry is how to thread these stories together, right? For so long, when I came up in engineering school, sustainability basically meant operational carbon, right? And then, it's starting to become that maybe you have a couple of people doing LCA modeling and looking at EC3 and getting involved, and a tiny little bit of people who might think about circularity and like, oh, what can we do if we make everything out of hemp? There's crazy, awesome people on the side. And now we finally got the contractors all in on the conversation. And it is the same continuous conversation. And shout out to Aurora, who's on this call, who we corporatized her diagram of this. This is definitely Aurora's. I see you. But we really need to tell this story together, right? It's not these separate siloed boxes. We have to think about carbon and waste and on-site emissions as this continuous story. And if a client doesn't want to hear it from one end, we're always there with an exciting story to tell them on the other. So I really think that that's an important part of this, that we need to see the complete picture. And I think part of that complete picture is human health, whether it's A1 through A3 or A4 and A5, especially, or the end of life. It's not just carbon that we're on the hook for, it's health impacts. If we use high carbon, polystyrene insulation, that's made out of carcinogenic materials, right? That's going to have a high impact for carbon and a high impact for folks where it gets made in Cancer Alley, right? If we don't think about tracking A4 and 5, we're subjecting, tons of construction workers, the people who are the lifeblood of this industry, to, all sorts of dangerous things that always don't get included when we do well certification and fit well. That's inequity right there. If we only think about the white collar workers that we're designing for, we don't think about the manufacturing workers, we don't think about the construction workers, we don't think about the people who had to end up living next to a landfill with the crap that we design in our buildings. We have to think about these issues. It's not just high VOCs that we need to get rid of. We really need to think about how A4, A5, the whole shebang of carbon is making an impact. And I just want to salute all the folks, especially Mark Chen from SBB. He basically taught me everything about the impact that contractors can have, and Jesse Buckmaster from Hathaway Dinwiddie. there's such a huge way that we can move the industry on this, and every kind of painstaking conversation you'll have with the subcontractor, every Excel sheet y'all fill out, that's more than just the carbon impact. You're really going to be improving someone's health. Maybe some little girl gets to run track because she doesn't have asthma, right? That's the kind of impact we can have from these conversations. And of course, like everything else in America, this is it's not just the inequities of what health do we pay attention to in terms of what jobs, but also, time and time again, it comes up who's getting exposed to more pollution, right? There's this incredible paper out. I'll send a link. It was just published in Science Advances. You can also read a really kind of fun, less jargony way of reading out at the New York Times. But basically, some really great building scientists and air quality pollutant scientists looked through all the different types of pollution exposures people across the United States are exposed to. And, no surprise, people of color are way more exposed to things like construction pollution, that's pollution from highways in terms of cars and trucks, even like crappy residential appliances. Of course, like the big industrial pollution sources, they're not putting them in my backyard in Santa Monica. You can guess where they're putting, high pollutant things, and we're contributing to it. If we have longer supply chains in terms of contributory A4 emissions, there's more likely that it's going to touch, a high polluting industrial place. So we really need to think about, who we're impacting, and how, if we want to talk about equity, diversity, inclusion initiatives, talk about health, one way that we can really have an impact that's super quantifiable and, really does some damage to kind of lessen these inequities that we see in the United States. This is a way that we can do it, tracking the data and making sure that we're not contributing to existing health problems, existing air quality issues, not polluting water and soil. It's even if you care about animal rights, there's this really moving video out of Miami right now around just getting erosion control right, so they're not just dumping a bunch of construction debris into the bay. So every way that you can kind of slice it, every story that warms your heart, there is a story to tell, and thinking about tracking A4 and A5 and doing the right thing in terms of the construction process. And they're already doing it. The Northern Europeans are always beating us to stuff in terms of sustainability. And I think, this stuff is happening. This equipment is getting installed. It's getting, put on site. It's saving folks money, and it's gaining their project accolades. So we can't pretend anymore that it's just a pipe dream. I know we've talked to folks and they've said, no, it's not available. This is not something clients are interested in. But as we've learned with embodied carbon, sometimes, it's the chicken and the egg situation, where if we start talking about it to clients, if we start making a fuss about it, people are going to care. And luckily, people in C40, that great nonprofit, the folks in Los Angeles care, right? It's alongside their embodied carbon goals around, a lot of the things you've been hearing with 2030, they're also talking about zero emissions. So this is coming down the pipe for any architect, any sustainability consultant, any contractor on this call. You can run from it for only so long, and you don't want to be left behind in the dust, because it's coming from the Biden administration. It's coming on the federal level. So it's going to come from our cities. It's going to come from, hopefully LEED will get its act together and, get A4 and A5 into this and think about human health from, outside the occupant considerations. ILFI, this is already something you have to do for the zero carbon certification, living building challenge. We need to get our act together on this. It's really something important for us. And like I said, and that I've dropped some links into the, just because I was running out of time, that there are examples that we can go to. And I think a lot of this was covered in the other slides, but the easy ones like trailers, lighting, generators, let's make that movement, right? Let's push Volvo to get more of these out. Let's push Caterpillar. You don't see Caterpillar's name in here. Why aren't they doing it? How can we act collectively to have this impact? And it's not just about human health, right? It's, the carbon is already covered. And I know, the graph on the left and on top left is a fully electric using a dirty Chicago grid, and it's still, half the carbon as the typical diesel excavator. But the hybrid emissions, something that, has that dual function, if you're worried about using something on site and it failing, they still pack both, an air pollution punch and an air quality punch and a carbon punch of improvement. And, there's if you just kind of sit down and read some of that, what stakeholders care about on projects, whether you do that from like a equity point of view, or if it's a compliance issue, noise and dust, these are issues the world over. And, going towards electric equipment, electrified equipment, that's really where we need to go, in terms of also protecting people's hearing for the construction workers and for the community, right? It's a really loud, dangerous situation. So it's an easy thing to rectify. And I think, I'm going to run out of time, that, this is a fun way, everybody's getting all the fun talking about decarbonization and electrification. All the MEP engineers finally get their day in the sun. Take it from them, right? It's not fair. It can't all be about them. It's not just for heat pumps. We need to be talking about decarbonization in an inclusive way that also includes subcontractors and contractors. It's just another way of, our supply chains. You can't get any insulation anywhere right now, but what you can get is local products. So just like in terms of our small business shopping, we need to start thinking about locals better, so we don't have, these terrible warehouse situations creating, diesel and natural gas streams for communities. And in some places, we really need to start looking at the local air quality context and understanding, how much of a problem are we contributing to a place like LA, places, big cities like India, Hyderabad, Mumbai, like we don't want to be increasing an already bad situation. And I think, a big question for all of us to ask is, I think the rise of air quality monitoring within the interior of our buildings is definitely something people are concerned in. And when is that really going to come, that outdoor air quality monitoring to every single job site? I think it'll be here in the next 5 years. And if it doesn't, we should make it happen, right? And I think, just to echo my fellow folks that were presenting before me, I think for the architects and consultants as well, this is on your backs too. We can't just have the contractors pull the whole load for us. It's not fair. We need to, show that this is something that we care about, from the earliest stages of projects, start asking about it, and understand that the data points that it's a full-time equivalent to bring someone on the job. We need to make sure that that's showing something that, we care about on our team. And that's not just something that is nice to have. It's something we have to have, and we need to advocate for it, and legislative assemblies, just like we're advocating to get more heat pumps, just like we're advocating for better carbon rules. And maybe we should take some clients to task and say, why isn't this in your RFPs? Why don't you consider tracking A4 and A5 or air pollution? If people really want to look at ESG scores and look at the social side of things, how we're improving human health, A4 and 5 tracking, that's what we can do. And the amazing panelists before me kind of explained all the great ways of the how and the how, but the why. There's so many reasons to say why for all of this, and just educating all of the staff, how we can build solidarity through sustainability, I think is really powerful. I know Jesse Buckmaster, when we were doing the red list materials for a project in Santa Monica, it was really exciting to hear how excited all of the construction team got about the red list when they realized that their health was getting treated just as seriously as, the city of Santa Monica folks. And I think a lot of time we don't build a big tent and bring everybody into it. But I think tracking A4 and A5, making sure that we're keeping folks' health, in mind. Let's bring everybody in. I think this is such a great opportunity for that. And we haven't done enough of that, and that's probably why we haven't been able to get as far, because we need to bring more people into that conversation. And it starts with every job site, and, getting in there early and just talking to everybody you can about it. So that's it from me. Oh, one more thing. I forgot. Another fun thing you could do, maybe you don't have the budget to do do all of the tracking. I know it can be a lot, or you're just starting out. Use the social cost of carbon. Just use the number 51, multiply it out by your carbon cost. Use EC3 or something, and look up social cost of carbon. Really, it's a way of putting a dollar amount of like what are the externalities that we're not putting on carbon, and show this to your clients and say, if you do the right things in terms of carbon impact, this is what it means for the economy. And it's going to go, this is going to come into regulation, and it's going to get higher and higher. People, companies like Microsoft already have an internal carbon fee. So just one more thing to say, if you don't like spreadsheets, just use the number 51. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.